Hi guys, and welcome back to the Scale Model Shed YouTube channel, and in this video I'm building this lovely model of a Ki-84 by Arma Hobby. And 1/72 isn't my usual scale, so at first this kit felt really small. But the level of detail Arma Hobby put in is phenomenal, and I have to say that the fit and build qualities of this kit are, in my opinion, up there with the best of them. And this version of the kit offers you 3 Ki-84 Special Attack or Kamikaze unit schemes. Now, being a Kamikaze unit, these paint schemes were probably pretty fresh. But I like to weather my models, so I'm going to move away slightly from absolute historical accuracy. And being that this is a Japanese aircraft, I'm going to have some paint falling off. So introduction done, I hope you enjoy the video. So during this build I'm going to use a few extras, and I'm going to use a 3D printed pilot seat, 3D printed main landing gear wheels and an Edward photo etch upgrade set. And I'll pop links to these items in the description below so you can purchase them off my website, or as usual you can come and see me in the shop. I usually remove photo etch from the fret using a knife blade and then fix it in position using VMS's Flexi CA glue. Here I'm using Micro Industries Crystal Clear to give more of a glass impression on the dials. There's some injection pins on the inside of the fuselage, and I don't think they're going to get in the way, but I remove them just in case they do later down the line. Once all the parts of the cockpit have been assembled, I prime them in black before spraying them with Mitsubishi cockpit colour. And I repeat this process for the two halves of the inside of the fuselage. And then after picking out some of the detail with a silver, I apply a deep brown panel line wash. I apply some chipped paint effects to the cockpit, as well as picking out the detail on the seat by dry brushing it with a silver. With the cockpit complete, I move to closing up the two halves of the fuselage. And at this point the kit instructions tell you to glue the cockpit and the engine in position whilst gluing together the two halves. But as long as you do it before you glue the wings on, you can easily glue the cockpit and the engine in afterwards. So to keep things simple, for the minute I put the cockpit to one side. And here I'm using Tamiya extra thin glue, which runs into the join, bonding the two halves and leaves no residue when dry. Make sure the front halves are perfectly aligned before the glue dries. The wings have some quite hefty attachments to the sprue which encroach into their leading edge. So to ensure I don't damage the wing, for the minute these are left slightly long, as these can be sanded more precisely once the upper and lower halves of the wings are glued together. And I'm using tweezers to press the two halves of the wings together, because using your fingers is asking for a gluey fingerprint. And here's a good example of how good the fit on this kit is. It really is very good. And when the fit's as good as this, a simple scrape with a sharp knife blade can get rid of the vast majority of any visible seam line that needs sorting. Following this, a medium 6 to 800 grit followed by a 1200 to 2000 fine grit should suffice. But as usual, the seam lines can be checked for any imperfections at the later stage when we prime the kit. The tabs on the front of the wings can now be cut off more precisely, and a coarse grade sanding file can be used to clean them up locally. The Ki-84 was a fully riveted aircraft, so I figured it would be a good idea to put those on. And I used tape to create guidelines for the riveter. And once done, the surface was gently smoothed off with a fine grade sanding pad. So let's hope that was worth it, and now that's done, the engine and the cockpit can be glued into position. I drilled out holes for the nose mounted cannon, and then glued some brass tube into position for the barrels. Ready for the painting process, I held the cowlings that fit over the top of the exhaust in place with blue tack, and this will allow me to paint the exhausts off the model and fit them at the end. The front screen is glued into position using VMS's Transfer Fix, and any residue can easily be cleaned off using their universal weathering carrier light type. And once everything was assembled, the model can be masked, ready for painting. And before I prime the model, I carefully clean the plastic with some isopropyl alcohol. And then all surfaces are sprayed with a thin coat of Mr. Surfacer 1500 Grey. I had a rough idea what I wanted the finished article to look like. And the first thing I did after priming was to lay down some aluminium in areas that I knew I wanted the paint to be completely removed. I then masked off any appropriate areas using masking fluid, meaning that when the whole model was painted in olive drab, these areas would remain clean aluminium. Any really delicate chipping can be done later on directly over the olive drab using a brush. And once that was done, the whole model was sprayed with a light coat of Japanese Air Force olive drab. I then used a darker AK Real Colour olive brown to do some post shading, and this was heavily thinned to about 75% thinners. And then adding some tan colour into the mix created a paler shade for the control surfaces. And now the masking fluid can be removed. And remember, if you're not happy with any areas of aluminium, you can always paint over them, and you can fine tune any unnatural looking areas with a brush at a later date. So the underside was very simply painted in grey-green, and then a little bit of overspray was touched up around the engine cowling. So one thing worth mentioning at this point is that I am going to be doing a lot of masking on this kit. And I feel much safer using the Mr. Colour paints because I know they will not come away during unmasking. I'm going to paint on the insignia and I'm going to use low tack masking film and this circle cutter from Flexifile. And again, I'll put a link for this in the description. I start by cutting out the size of the outer white circle. I then use the cut out circle to position the roundel, ensuring they're in the same position on both sides. The outer section is then used as the mask and the inner circle is removed. As it's also good practice to spray white underneath red, white is sprayed across the whole area. This is where clear masking film comes in, because being transparent, you can ensure that everything is central. Okay, this is where things start getting fun, and we need to mask off these stripes that go down the length of the aircraft. So first I'm going to mask off the red, and then I'm going to mask an offset for the two white stripes down the side. And then I'll remove the central red tape and paint the whole thing in white. Remembering to first mask off the roundel in the middle, along with any areas I wish to remain aluminium or green. And again, this is where the transparent masking film comes in, as I need to mask the white offset either side of the red stripe. And there's a few areas that need touching up, but the initial results are pretty good. And finally, the anti-reflective black can be sprayed across the top of the nose. Now I need to make this rather crude looking loss of paint look more like natural wear and tear. And I do this by adding much finer chipping by using a brush and in some cases a sponge. And this process sometimes works the other way by adding back in the olive drab. And as in all cases, but even more especially in 1/72nd, the smaller you can get the chip the better, and you can never have a chip too small. After painting the wing roundels, I added some olive drab to the mix and applied some subtle post shading. There's only a few decals to go on this model, so I apply some gloss varnish locally to where they're going to be set. So once dry, that's all the decals, painting and chipping done. So I'm now ready to unify everything with a coat of matte varnish across the whole model. Now I'm going to use a thin wash of dark shade oil paints to pick out any panel line and rivet details, as well as creating some tonal variation between the panels. And here I am using plenty of thinners, and the wash will always collect heavily into the recesses but will sit much more naturally on the flat surfaces. And once the thinners has evaporated off, you can blend the oils using a dry brush or cotton bud. And the good thing about oils is that even up to a couple of days later, a cloth slightly damp with thinners can easily wipe them away. So as not to have all the panel lines uniformly dark, I mix up a wash of a light grey oil. And I use this in a few places to add variation to the panel line colour, as well as using it to tone down the black on the anti-glare strip on the top of the nose. After applying a panel line wash to the underside, which again I don't wipe off, I just blend with plenty of thinners, I pick out the features of some of the panels using the rivets I applied earlier as a guide. And I use this sepia oil unthinned and blend it with a dry brush. The exhaust staining was applied by airbrushing Tamiya buff, followed by red brown. Then black pigments were applied and I moved these into position to accentuate build up within the panel lines. This was then fixed by dropping pigment fixer to the side of the pigment and allowing it to flow through. And finally some white oil paint was positioned and blended directly by the exit of the exhaust manifold. The propeller was painted in RLM grey before the tips were painted in white before being finished in yellow. The wing mounted bomb was first primed in black, the stripes were masked and painted, and then it was given a coat of gloss varnish. After some chipping, a light grey oil wash tones down the black. So that's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I certainly enjoyed doing 1/72 for a change, and I'm well impressed with Arma Hobby. I've now moved my modelling bench from my shed and it's now located in the shop. And I'm hoping that will allow me to get videos made a lot quicker, but I guess time will tell. If you haven't already, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel and go and check out the shop at www.scalemodelshed.co.uk. So here's the completed Ki-84, thank you so much for watching, happy modelling everyone, and see you next time.